What is up, everybody? Today I have Melissa with me, and she is a new grad PTA who just recently passed her boards. And it was a pleasure to work with her as she came through my program. She asked so many great questions during group coaching calls, and it was just a pleasure to get to know her. So we're gonna get to hear a little bit about Melissa. First of all, everybody, round of applause for passing your boards. It's a big feat. It's a big accomplishment. So Casey's watching right now. I know you guys were in class together.
Hello, Casey.
Yeah, so I know we've kind of already discussed this before, but I'm sure a lot of students are going to want to hear about you changing careers and deciding to pursue PT and everything. So what made you decide to pursue physical therapy, and why did you decide to become a physical therapist assistant?
Um, Back in 2000 it was about 2010, I quit teaching and started working in a physical therapy clinic. So that's kind of where my interest started, and I was in a very well supported system in that clinic where I was able to learn a lot, and I guess the seed was planted there, and because of the fact that I was able to work very closely with patients, and I got to see how rewarding it was and how um, nice it was to see a patient come in. They just had a total knee replacement, and then 6 weeks later they're walking out the door saying bye to us because they just did so well. So the rewarding side of things kind of sucked me in and made me want to do it. And then as a tech, I was like, well, I'm learning all this. Why not, make the next step and, get a little pay increase and have a little bit more responsibility. So that's kind of where it started. And it's just I've been in the field for a really long time, and so it was just kind of a natural progression for me.
Oh, that's awesome. And so choosing PTA was just the next step up, right?
Yep.
Makes sense to me. No, that's awesome. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who they've switched careers and they're trying to see is this really for me? Can I really do it? And yes, you can do it easily. No
Mhm.
problem. No need to ever doubt yourself. So what do you feel was your biggest struggle, fear, or obstacle during your journey towards becoming a PTA? And then specifically when studying for the boards, what do you feel was the thing that challenged you the most?
Um, so even when I was applying for school and figuring out how I was going to pay for school, that was a big challenge even before I even started, just because you have to do it full time. So figuring all that financially out was the hardest part. The job I was working in during COVID, the gym I was working at ended up closing. And so I sold my house. Selling my house helped me financially pay for school. So that's, if you can figure that out, then, getting into school, that's probably the biggest hurdle to get through going into school. Once in school and studying for boards, I think the biggest hurdle, the biggest obstacle, the hardest thing was being organized and having a plan to kind of know where to start, because there's so much information. There's there's 2 years worth of information that you have to cram into and take a test for. So being organized was the biggest thing I had trouble with because it was just so overwhelming. So that's was the scariest thing. The hardest thing to do is just know where to go and have a plan of action. So
And I'm sure you felt a lot better once you solidified your plan of what you were doing and everything
oh
like that.
gosh. Yeah, when I reached out to you and you helped me with that, just the calendar, just having that calendar in front of me was like, it took a huge weight off my shoulders, because it took that huge mountain and kind of made it into smaller little hills, and I knew I didn't have to manage learning everything and cramming everything in. It was in bits and pieces, and it was easier to swallow that way. So that was good.
Yeah, and I feel I make the study guide as in I take the topics that are important and that topics in a way that I feel can break it down, that you can actually digest that topic in a day rather than looking and being I have to study all of musculoskeletal.
Right, it's so overwhelming. So even just having that, having the outline of kind of, point A to point B, and then doing the other thing too, preparing for the boards, taking the practice tests and then going back and reviewing. I know it's not, you're not going to see the same questions on the test that you saw on the practice test, but once you take a test and you, or take a, you answer a question, and if you get it wrong, you go back and you review it, you're going to remember that information the next time you see it, maybe in a different form or format or different question, but you're going to see that information again. And so, if you do mess up on the practice test, it doesn't matter, but it helps you prepare for what kind of questions you're going to get and how you're going to get those questions asked. So that was another thing that helped too. And then having it built in through the outline of the calendar that you gave us, that's, it wasn't, you could go back and you realize too, once you went through musculoskeletal and you went through neuromuscular, when you took your practice test, that stuff was right there in front of you and it was very fresh in your mind. And then there were questions in the practice test that you weren't quite sure of. But once I went through the second section of the outline and the calendar and I studied through that stuff, the next practice test, I was like, oh man, this is easier. Like I'm remembering more stuff. And then when I got to the third one, it was just like, it was easier because I had covered 90% of it. I mean, there's always going to be that 10% that you're not going to have a clue that's going to be on there, but um, going through in that form and taking it, one day at a time and one section at a time helped.
Yeah, and I always say the best way to remember something is to be embarrassed that you got it wrong.
Yep.
And then you're like, I have to get that.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I'm glad that the study schedule was helpful. And honestly, that was the best thing I did for myself when I was
Yeah.
studying, to finally put it down. And then the most important thing is sticking to it, at least
Mhm.
as close as you can, giving yourself grace if you have something happen for a day or two. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, the feedback about that.
Yeah. I will say, going through taking the test in January, going through Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays, that was challenging too because I mean, before you know it, you have 2 days of family in town and things going on. And so kind of having that calendar to look ahead and say, okay, I know I have to do this, this, and this on this day. I know that's not going to happen. So you're able to go back and kind of reconfigure it a little bit. So, but having it there in front of you is helpful. But I will say the holidays was challenging, especially if you're traveling places, because nobody wants to study when they're traveling.
Yeah, yeah. And then you're so close to the board state of like January 6th that you're like, I'm done.
Yep.
You're like, I'm over this. I'm over this. Yeah. Yeah. Taking the boards in January is pretty rough, but hey, you did it.
I did.
You did it.
I
Yeah.
did.
So how did, I know I kind of sort of sought you out, but how did you hear about PTA Elevation?
Um, we had received you had sent, I think it was one of our instructors, you had sent out an email about that. And um so that's through that email, that's how I heard about what you were doing.
And what made you decide to like click on everything and be like, oh, maybe I'll check this out and
Gosh.
see how this can help me?
Well, when I finished my second rotation, and we had that like week after we were done, and we had taken a practice test after we finished, and just the mere thought of how much information I had to study, and I had no idea kind of where to start. I had the score builders book and I had, all kinds of stuff to do. I had lots of resources, but I had absolutely no direction and I had no idea. I was like, this is so frustrating because I don't know where to start. Do I start with neuromuscular? Do I start with musculoskeletal? But how do I study and like what do I need to study? What's important? And then so just kind of sitting there thinking like I can't do this. I'm going to get overwhelmed and I'm just going to shut down. So just kind of knowing that you were able to give even just a little bit of direction, and then there was some accountability in there too, that um you were kind of there, like I would bounce questions off of you and just kind of like, how are they going to ask this question? Like I know the information, but how are they going to ask it on the test? So that's probably the biggest thing, is just knowing that I had no idea where to go and I knew you could help kind of point me in a direction.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. It makes me feel good knowing that like I'm like, okay, I think this will help people, and then it does help people. And
Yeah,
I'm like, this is awesome. When everybody sent me, like people were DMing me on Instagram when people like pass their stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Like I was more excited when you guys were all passing your board saying that like I helped you so much than I think I was when I like passed my boards. I remember when I passed my boards, I was at the gym and I like checked it. I'm like, oh gosh, I passed, but now I have to do a workout with like 20 burpees. I don't
Mhm.
want to do. So besides like it sounds like just the study schedules, the guidance, the accountability was what helped you the most. And I'm just really happy that I was able to provide that for you. So how did you feel on that day when you logged in and saw that you passed the boards?
Oh my gosh. It was like a waterfall of emotion. Like I was relieved and um like excited and happy and like tears of joy, and just it was like a culmination of, you know, I still can't even explain it. It's an amazing feeling just to know you're done. But then after I realized that I didn't have any more tests to take, I didn't have any more things to study for, it's kind of like I've been going for 2 years, like, always having something kind of on the horizon that I had to study for is kind of, I feel kind of, I don't want to say lost, but I feel kind of like, what can I work towards next? Because I've always been, having something to work towards, or a test to take, or a class that I have to pass, and then I had the boards. And so it was just, it's a weird feeling to be done, and knowing that you cross the finish line and you don't have to race anymore. So it's a very good feeling.
Yeah, I kind of understand that. Like I just finished this thing. Now what do I do? Kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah. What's
But
my next challenge? Hmm.
hey, find something that you like and specialize in it.
Right. I am
Really,
actually, in March, I'm taking a Herman and Wallace pelvic floor class.
that's a
So
good one.
yeah, so I've been learning, that side of things, and it's a very untapped, area, and it's a very interesting area. So I'm going to do that in March. So it's a pretty neat thing. So
No, that's awesome. I know a PT who took that course and it was phenomenal. And she gave me a lot of the notes from it because she accidentally got like 3 copies of it. She's like, "You want some?" I'm like,
nice.
yeah, that's so cool. And like
Yeah.
that's the thing though. And anybody who's listening to this, if you're like 6 months in and you're feeling like a burnt out like new grad, you can like do different things. Like there's so many things you can do in PT, like from like pediatrics to like pelvic floor and stuff like that. I do like foot and ankle and whatnot. There's so many cool things. If you're bored of one thing, just switch and learn something else and do something else.
Yeah, and your clinical might pay for it, or
Mhm.
reimburse you for the class. But yeah, there's so much, yeah, there's so much stuff to do.
And yeah, that's awesome. And so, what piece of advice, if you could think of just one, if you want to list out a couple things, but that's fine. What piece of advice would you offer any PTA student who's completing their journey towards taking the boards right now?
They're getting ready to take it, or they're just kind of in school?
Yeah, at any point in their journey, and specifically for those who are preparing to take it, either whenever like the
So
next boards is.
yeah, so I would probably start, and I don't know how you could incorporate this into your stuff, but um as you're going, like, say I'm going through the neuro class, like the actual class, I would start like understanding things in terms of how they're going to ask the test question. Because just learning the material, like a lot of times I just learned it enough to take the test and pass the test. I didn't really, I absorbed it, and it was familiar to me, but it wasn't 100% like I can come back and spit this back out for the test. So I would probably take a question, or try to use the information in terms of like how the boards are going to ask the test. That's probably a thing I would probably do. And it's hindsight is 2020, but those are probably things I would do. And then, um, in terms of just getting ready for the boards, like pace yourself out far enough so that you don't feel overwhelmed while you're studying. But having like a calendar with specific things broken into different pieces, like you're taking your your neuro chapter and breaking it down into, just covering terminology one day. And then, so giving yourself enough time to study so that you don't feel like you have to like cram it all in. And because even just following I think mine was, I think 8 weeks. When I got to the last week, I'd covered everything, but I was like, all right, if I don't know it now, I'm not going to know it. And so giving yourself enough time so you're not like panicking the night before. So yeah,
No,
having an organized calendar and, looking at your information in terms of how the boards are going to present it to you while you're going through school would be helpful too.
No, and I agree too. And that was one of the things that specifically helped me when I started learning things. It was less of like, I have to know this for the test. It was more like, I need to know how this is going to show up on the NPTE and how this is going to show up in a clinic. Like, how would this show up with a real person? And then for the test that actually matters.
Great. How am I going to apply this in a real life situation? That's, and they say too, when you go through and take your boards, it's more of the boards are looking to make sure that you're going to keep that patient safe. And so safety is the main thing. So the question, you're not going to get asked like specific, define this term. They're going to give you a scenario and you're going to need to give the most safest answer. So.
Yeah. And sometimes that doesn't seem like what should be done.
Right.
But in reality, that is the answer. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on here and doing this interview. I really appreciate it. Where can students find you if they would like to ask you a little bit more about like how you're a career changer and whatnot and how you manage school?
So I'm at Pivot in Mechanicsburg and in Pennsylvania, Carlisle Pike in the area. But you can also get I think it's at Chaser232 is my Instagram name.
I think so.
And I can give you my email address too. It's mchase@pivoths.com. So you guys can reach me there if you need anything, you have any questions. And if you need help with anything locally, I know you're local too, but anybody that needs help with studying or has questions, I'm free and available too. So I'd love to help.
Yeah, well, it was wonderful having you in the program. It was wonderful getting to know you. And thank you so much for coming on here tonight.
Thank you.
Of course. All right. Bye.